Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm going for a walk in the night in a place I grew up. And it's filled with powerful memories. In this neighborhood, depending on which zone you pick, I've been in 20 to 80% of the houses when I was young, with other children and teenagers and adults. And we lived here in this neighborhood. We lived here. And those memories are so rich. And even though there were dark times in them, they're very bright. They have an aura of beauty. Somehow, even the dark things have this aura of beauty. And as I walk these streets and see the houses where I lived, or my friends lived, or my girlfriend lived, and I hear the two competing sounds most clearly. One is the freeway to my left, which is an interstate freeway, and the other is the frog chorus from the delta waters on my right. And for the moment, these two things are reversed because the sound of the freeway goes better with my right side, and is more like my right side in how I think about things. And the frog chorus on my left, on my right, is natural to my left, my dreaming mind. Occasionally, I get to hear the beautiful sound of the Opspini in Blackfoot. Beautiful language. My God, how beautiful it is. Compared to ours, which seems to me so angular. And theirs, which seems to me to come from the sounds of nature. I don't want to say itself. I think of it as herself. But just nature. You don't have to gender it or ungender it. It's all the genders. Ah, yeah. I hear a distant Opspini, which is the white cheek geese of the northern places that have come now to dwell here with us. In our cities, they've become synanthropes. They become animals that can prosper in and around human colonies. The moon is a comfort. I see Orion, but I have my own constellation, which, if you think you can see it, please tell me. It is a big two-headed bird that Orion is the tail of, and it has long wings to either side and then two distinct heads. See if you can see it some night when the stars are clear in this time of year. Yeah, I hear some Opspini in the distance. You know, time is such a strange thing. Now, for the moment, there's an animal with me. And I wonder if she would come to me. So I'm kneeling on the cold cement, and 18 feet in front of me is a cat. And we are just observing each other. The cat has decided that I'm not particularly a good idea. But since the cat didn't startle immediately, I thought there might be a chance for us to have a moment of relation. So I knelt. I got down low, right? Around the cat's level. I can't go quite that low. But if I want to understand something, there's lots of different good ways to proceed in such a fascinating quest. Then one of the things I want to do is I want to make it bigger than me. I want to stand under it and look up to it, as I do right now to the moon. And of course, this is very easy with the moon or the sun or the stars or constellations. But it's not always so easy in ourselves. And I could speak now, and I may even, with great articulation about methods and perspectives and metaphors and similes and language and holophors and so many things I've come to learn in my lifetime. But understanding is really what I'm after. It's what I trust most. Seeing. And of course, that's a metaphor. Because I don't mean to see with my eyes. I mean to see with the aspects of my being that make meaning, not merely of experience, because that's rather passive, but of action, doing, being, right? The verb of things, that verbal interiority that isn't reference, it's embodied. We can trust it. It's ancient beyond our ideas of time. It comes from before we were born. It leaks into our lives, gushes when we are children. But as we get older and become more structured, and now I've turned a corner, and the frogs and the geese are on the left and the freeway's on the right. Polarities, you see. So as we, quote unquote, get older, what I would rather say is that as we develop in our peculiar contexts and specializations and struggles and confusion and adoration and heartbreak and vocation, hear all these shun sounds? It's not an accident, these shun sounds, so many of them. Our relationships, our processes of maturation, all these things, and many more I cannot name. We each develop uniquely. It's as if each seed of our being can become a tree, and some of those trees can become jungles, depending on which we most develop. I have to say that frog chorus is mighty comforting. I just naturally go toward the chorus of frogs, or usually even the calls of animals. In any case, choruses. So we each develop uniquely along many branches of potential development. But for most of us, our potential development will be very narrow. In other words, there will be a few commonly cultural trees that we will succumb to the gravity of, and we will develop these things primarily. And in a way, there's great sensibleness there because we're in the context we're actually in. You know, whether you live in Paris or Morocco or Czechoslovakia or a factory city somewhere in Asia, whether you live in India or Madagascar or Australia, right? We are each in a specific array of local contextual gravity wells, things that draw us toward them, things we are rewarded for developing, and things we are discouraged from developing. And we develop all kinds of things anyway. But the gravity of where we are is very deep. And not just where we are in space, as we might ordinarily think, but where we are in time. And not just the time of the year or the time meaning like the epoch, the personal, communal time of a specific place in a specific moment. Like this one, right now. We have deep time senses, and many of the senses that we think are supernatural or psychic or are siddhis, which are the fruits of deep meditative development, or, martial arts skills, many kinds of skills, the skills of music, the skill of writing, even the skill of articulating not merely my thoughts, because that's not what's happening. I'm playing a song with my mind for us together, for the chorus, like the frog chorus. And I have a direction in mind, but I'm wandering all around in the beginning because I want to start with a broad scope of possibilities and seeds from which trees may grow or rivers may flow or forests may rise or mountains may stand. Yeah. Now, the freeway is behind me and the frog chorus is in front of me. There's a whole delta out there. It's gigantic. I've been on it. It's filled with brackish water and tule islands and gigantic catfish the size of crocodiles and carp and bass and storks and white-cheeked geese and crayfish and frogs, bats and owls, hawks and kestrels, raccoons and opossums, skunks, snakes, sunfish. I know because I've been all through those waters many times and swam in them and fished in them and lived near them. They're the source of life, wildly unvalued, that this local place emerges from. So I like to get underneath things. It didn't work with the cat this time, but that's okay. I once had a fascinating conversation with an infant who couldn't speak, because when he made certain noises, I just got down on the floor so that my face and his face were at the same level. And then he communicated something to me so mysterious, so impossible, so profound, that for me to make ordinary language about it would be insulting. And there are many such things. A kiss, a moment of deep insight or awareness or love or understanding. These things are like this. There's my simile. The closer I get to the frogs now on my right, the more comfortable I feel because I trust the signal. It's older than language. It's older than machines. It's rich with dimensionality we don't even have concepts for, let alone words for. If I were listening on Earth and I wanted to find the signal that the intelligences of many other worlds were sending to this world, I would listen to the whale. I would listen to the frog and the dove and the mouse. I would listen to the snake. I would listen to the scorpion or the spider or the bat. I would listen to the eagle. I would listen to the magpie, to the blue jay. I would listen to the praying mantis. I would listen to the turtle. All of these beings I would listen to because they are made of a form of intelligence we moderns are too timid to imagine. And I don't understand it. Yet, though I certainly lift it far above me, I don't understand it. I kneel before it in rapt fascination, in reverence, in adoration, in wonder. And I feel like a blind man singing the praises of light. I cannot see their light most of the time, though there are occasional glimpses. And it's like they're trying to get through to someone who's very hard-headed, right? It's like the animals are trying, and the plants and the trees and the insects and all of the beings, the lakes and the living places, they are speaking to us all the time. In fact, they never stop doing so. And it's not urgent for them. It is their natural way of being. They speak to us. And we can speak with them and listen to them. We can learn. We can remember how to do this. This is the nature of the kind of animal human beings are. If we are merely humble and forget what culture has told us, just set it aside, it'll be there when we come back, and wonder about the nature of worlds in time-space, worlds teeming with billions of forms of intelligent life, that the humans, because these beings don't speak language, think, don't speak. The humans think the grass is not speaking, earth is not speaking, the mountain is not speaking, the sun is not speaking. You know the rest of the list. And it's true, they're not speaking. They influence senses in us that have been overridden by the bright lights and the machines and the ideas and the language and the concepts and the short-term goals and the product and the consuming of the product and the direct mental manipulation that social media and news and television has long comprised but has now become peculiarly virulent. I hear Here's some Apspini. So, we're all in a bit of a trap. The most stimulating aspects of our common sensory and relational experience are empty. They're missing most of the actual content and dimensionality that they've become representations of. We could call this lossy compression, and it's happened to human cognition over epochs of our development. But we now live in the apotheosis of this issue. We have continually lossily compressed the primordial elements of our inner compasses and our relationships with the world into transactions, largely utilitarian or profitable. And so we don't really have relationships so much anymore. And when I say we, I mean all of us to different degrees, but I certainly mean the vast cohort of the common people who are trapped in such impoverished layers of their capacities for awareness and thought and understanding and action and transformation and development that it might as well be as if they're in a prison. And we each have features of our lives that are like this, nearly all of us. There are some exceptions, it seems. So, here we are, together, in 2022, during a terrifying pandemic. But the pandemic itself is the surface crust on a much deeper message. And it's an old message. There used to be a commercial that started with it. With a trope of it, anyway. You don't mess with Mother Nature. The humans, in general, have both forgotten and neglected and consciously decided to see the world as the opportunity to convert it into objects. In a human body, the best analogy is cancer. We're making something like cancer in the world and in our minds. And these are highly polarizing kinds of cells that ignore all signals from the cohort from which they arose and to which they belong. And they just begin gathering up resources, all the resources they can, to keep propagating themselves. And this is what we call cancer. We don't understand the depth of the problem. It's not a solvable problem. It's an important problem. There have to be limits on the capacity of a single species. And ours has broken the limits, and we've done it through techne. And so now we're killing the world and each other and ourselves. That's the grim story. What's the bright story? So, earlier I was remarking on the experience of an imaginary human being who's lived all their lives next to a beautiful lake. And in our imaginary tale, the protagonist, be they whatever their gender may be or become, our hero awakens suddenly, unexpectedly, one morning in a desert. So the lake has always been shining, right? And they swam in the lake, they played in the lake, they learned about the creatures in the lake, they dreamed of the lake, they dreamed with the lake, they lived in the water. And now, suddenly, the most obvious, blatant thing that is always there is missing. Or, in our common human lives, this could take the form of many sudden transformations. Someone getting terribly ill, loss of a loved one, a sudden, unexpected catastrophe of some sort. And there is great darkness, suddenly, where previously there had at least been enough light to get along with, to get by with. If not, lots of light, if not common light. For many of us, light and creativity are fundamentally in relation. They are partly synonyms. They mean the same thing. And for many of us, a similar thing is joy, right? Joy and creativity and joy and creativity are fundamental to the urgencies in the deep aspects of our heart. And so many human beings get stuck in a layer of existence where it's mostly just work, pay the bills, try to recover from the damage, work, pay the bills, watch the news, post on Facebook, try to recover from the damage, etc. What I want to talk about is the person who wakes up in the desert. Now, one kind of person, or perhaps one phase of such a person, is great despair. How could it possibly be that the lake is gone? And not only that, it's way too hot. Everything is shining so brightly that it's hurting my mind. And there are no features to the landscape other than dunes of sand. And this is a troubling moment, a dark moment. When the light disappears, what do we do? In English, we might ask, how do we cope? But the problem with how do we cope, the fundamental problem, is that one thinks of this, and we are trained to think of this, as though I must cope by myself alone. Now, if we have rich cohorts in which we are loved and whom we respect and with whom we participate, then the idea of we is realized, but otherwise it's the royal we. It's the single one attempting to cope by itself. Or largely by itself, themselves. So, where did the water go in the little analogy? Where did it go? Because I'm talking about waters inside us. One day, we may be struggling, we may be having a rough life next to the lake, but one day we will wake up and the lake is gone. Then what shall we do together? Particularly together. Then what shall we do? And naturally, we run through a continuum of emotions and reactions. Oh, this is terrible. How can this have happened? Wait, this is impossible. I've never been without the light. I remember a time in my dreaming where I could only dream in darkness, and I had this feeling. So there were no shapes in my dreams and no colors. It was all black. That was rough. And I've always wondered, what is the source of light in dreaming? So we will run through a gamut of emotions and reactions, most of us. But some of us, and you could be one of them, and we could be two of them, And there could be 5 of us, or 10, or 1,000, or 1,000,000. We could understand that the water hasn't disappeared. The context has changed. And now where we sought light before, we will find darkness. And I can imagine, because I am like this, if every day I went to a well to get my water and one day I go and the entire well is missing, in fact the whole landscape has changed, I will be deeply troubled and think things like, there is no more water. Just as we might think in the desert, there is no more water. The water has been taken from me. We may think I was bad, I made a bad mistake. We may have all kinds of judgments or narratives or whatever. But we will greatly mourn the disappearance of the water. Now, the people of the desert know where to find water. They're like people with whom there is nearly never light, but they know where to find light when it is sparse or very, very scarce. The people of the desert will understand about water. And this, of course, is the fundamental metaphor behind Frank Herbert's book, Dune. But that's not where I got it. Times of great darkness come upon us, and they don't just come upon us individually. Since we have very little meaningful collective conversation, they could be upon us populationally, and we would not know or have no way to cope with that because we have no traditions or knowledge about how to do such things, except largely, medical knowledge of how to keep someone alive for a minute. In other words, every night all the people dream. And what if we woke up in the morning and we spoke about our dreams? What if we had the tradition of doing this every night? Well, then we would begin to sense a kind of weather, the weather of the in-between of us, the weather together. And this is the thing we are doing the opposite of in our modern cultures. And so because we are missing this, most of us are blind. And even if we are really good, we are still mostly blind. Because we don't have the group sensing that is natural to our kind of animal, except in very limited situations. A popular one we might think of is a SEAL team that executes complex, very dangerous military missions successfully with great frequency. But there are many others. There are beautiful ones. There are cooperatives of artists. There are people who dream together all the time, as our species always did. There are children who play games that transform the nature of time-space, that look just like silly games to the adults walking right next to them. There are jungles, there are forests, there are oceans, there are whales, for the moment. All these beings are with us. So in a time of great darkness, when the water disappears and when we're so used to being able to go to this one place in ourselves or in our life or in our situation and find the light to keep going, occasionally what happens is that that light disappears completely. And in fact, it may even become terrifying or ugly in its disappearance. Then at these times, which are very fraught with peril and fear and complexity and confusion, at these times we can learn to recover the sense of the one who dwells in the desert within us. And these are very subtle senses, because when the light has disappeared, you have to be able to sense very subtle light. Yeah? And so if we are just overwhelmed with superficial concerns and awareness and running through our habit trails, then of course we will not sense the subtle light and we will think, oh my God, the light has gone away. But always there's a transfer of potency, yeah, between the brightness and the darkness. And so when the great darkness comes, we can learn together to seek the potency in the darkness itself and find the other kind of light. The darkness that reveals the darkness's beauty. The beauty in the darkness of the superficial situation. Take a car crash where two people are dying. Yeah, suddenly there's been an accident. Yes, this is all terrible and bad. Yeah. But in 15 other dimensions, something absolutely incredibly beautiful is happening. It's just that we're looking at the car crash and we're very focused on the light is the living people and saving them. Perfectly good focus. But because we are so focused on our standard thing, as they pass away, we may miss the beauty. We may miss the beauty. There is a deep, meaningful shining in the darkness, and it is alive. And so when one aspect of a situation turns horrifying, there is always another aspect where the light is singing beautifully. And we may be confused or frightened or lost, and perhaps we should sometimes be. Or grieving, or addictive, or any of the things that we can become when we are placed under really powerful stress. But always the light is shining in a place where if we will look, if we can fish in the darkness, so to speak, we will find the signal. We will find the compass. It's just the inversion of what we're used to chasing, right? It's like a 180-degree turn. North has become south. Well, I've never listened to south. Okay, let's start listening to south now. Yeah. I use light to see. Oh, really? Let's use darkness to see now. Anyone who has walked in a wild place at night where there are no lights knows that you can use darkness to see. It's a different kind of seeing. But if I'm busy being upset that the light is going away, or the terrible catastrophe has happened, which are all things that actually happen to us, I'm not denigrating them. They are real things in their layer. But the layer in which we make meaning in our hearts and in our souls and in our relationships in the world, these layers are not of physical light. They are of some other things, and there are analogies to physics in those layers. There's something resembling gravity. Right? Our habits, my habits, have great gravity upon me. If I do not work consciously to escape them, I simply crystallize into them, and then I stop developing. So the light is the position outside my habits that can see my habits and say, oh, here's a habit, I'm enacting it. Oh, what if I did any other thing right now? Yeah. But in times of great trial, we can fish in the darkness, and we do this best together. Much better to know what's going on in the dark water with 5 or 6 fishermen, fisher people. Fishers. Much better to know this way. So we have the option to realize that when the light goes out and we are at our most vulnerable, our most confused, our most frightened, we can turn the compass around and look for the beauty. look for the grace, find and become the ecstatic, structure-breaking moment that is actually happening beyond everything we think. We can follow the brightness inside that darkness. And then we will realize the light has not disappeared. The light has transformed its polarity. It's still there, it's just in the place we never look for it because we're so trained to the lamp and the candle and the flashlight and the headlight and the television and the smartphone. In the great darkness, in the terrible pain, in the crisis, there is the brightness of incumbent mystery, the mysteries of birth and death and light and time and minds and dreams, all of these things. They are being revealed in the place we are not trained to look. All the places we are trained to look away from, especially because we are very compelled by the appearance. Yes, if the appearance is grim and terrifying and painful, then we can miss the great moment of beauty in the transformation of life to death, of habit to crisis, of joy to fear, of calm to anger. For each of these transformations, though natural to us, is largely composed of the inability to move awareness to another focus. And I am like a little child, and I am stubborn and confused. And I can't do the things I say, except on rare occasion. But I notice them, and I notice them now more than I ever have. And so I've been fishing in the darkness for years now. And I tell you, there is light in there. And that's what I've been fishing for. Perhaps you may find some. I hope that we can together. I have great dreams of such things, but my circumstances are as humble as anyone's. Bye-bye for now. Let's look in the darkness together.